guys. What's up? This weekend has been unbelievable. You guys, so much has happened in the Turtle Boy / Karen Reed arena this weekend. But we are not here for that right now. We are here for Phil Spector. So I hope everybody had a good weekend. I had a good weekend. Well, for the most part, I had a good weekend. My company canceled. Long story. Anyway, so the girls came over and they got some of their stuff out of their old room. It's still a mess in there. They didn't take everything, but they took some stuff. So I have room for company in there now. I don't have room for anything else. It's still a mess. And they brought their mother with them. So, at one point, I just got completely overstimulated and had to leave. So she's barking orders. They're fighting back and forth and hollering and yelling. I'm just like, I'm out. Just turned around and walked out of the room. Travis can deal with it. I'm like, too much stimulation. I can't deal. Just turned, walked out of the room. And then Travis comes in there and gets me and goes, come here. I was like, what? Just come here for a minute. They had one question that he could have asked me in the bedroom and could have relayed the answer. But no, I had to go back in there. So that was my weekend. And let's see, what else did we do? Oh, we went to Walmart. I tried to find a bathing suit. Nope, no go. They don't have a very good selection of bathing suits at Walmart. And like, we get there, there's kayaks lined up on the outside of the building. I'm like, ooh, if they have that many kayaks, good time to buy a bathing suit, right? They've got all this good stuff for summer out there, right? Nope. So I guess I'm going to have to go to Gainesville, bigger town, more selection. I don't want to pay like $80 for a bathing suit, you know? So, and I'm losing weight. I'm going to wear this bathing suit one summer, right? So I guess I'm just going to have to stick safety pins in my old one to keep it from falling off of me until I can get to my size I want to be, you know, and whatever. Okay, so we are still on Mr. Eyebrows, his cross with Alan Jackson. So, and I have a setup to redirect to Karen Reed. So this is going to be about an hour long. And I've been talking for about 5 minutes. So probably going to be a little after 9. I have Karen Reed set for 9, but it's going to be a little bit after. But that's okay.
Keep cross-examination.
Thank you. Experienced and credible expert. Is objectivity, neutrality, independence, correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you agree with that proposition?
Yes, sir.
As a matter of fact, if an expert were to testify and didn't have a level of neutrality, a level of objectivity, a level of independence, that expert's credibility would come into question, would it not?
Yes, sir.
And of course, you have indicated several times that you want to, I think the words you used yesterday when you were at the end of your testimony, when you were almost whispering to this jury, and you turned to them and you looked and you said, we have to stick to the objective scientific evidence. You remember that?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Have to stick to the objective evidence.
And that objective scientific evidence is what has driven you through this whole case, correct?
Yes, sir.
It was driving you when you were first hired onto this case as a consultant.
Yes, sir.
It was driving you yesterday during the course of your testimony yesterday, correct?
Yes, sir.
It's still driving you today, that objective scientific evidence.
Yes,
correct?
sir.
You began yesterday and you ended today. And almost exclusively yesterday, you talked about statistics. And a lot of your testimony was based on statistics.
No, the conclusion's not based on statistics.
I didn't ask you if the conclusion was, Doctor. I simply asked you, was your testimony in no small part yesterday, and did you end today with statistics?
I quoted statistics.
You
yes.
quoted a lot of statistics, as a
Yes,
matter of
sir.
fact. Correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Is that the type of objective scientific evidence that you use or you utilize as a neutral, objective, and independent forensic expert?
You can't make rulings as on a basis of statistics. Well, I guess DNA is based on statistics. It's all statistics. But with forensic pathology, what you have to do is assemble all the objective facts. You consider that, the probability, but it's not based on straight statistics, because there are no straight statistics, because you're dealing with individual people.
And you just, Doctor, you just indicated the mouthful right there. They're based on probabilities, correct?
That's correct.
So when you say in your experience, intraoral gunshot wounds are 99% suicide, 99% of the time you find them to be suicide, correct?
It's based on my experience, yes, sir.
And that has absolutely no relationship in science whatsoever to the facts that are before you in this case. Is that right, Doctor?
No, sir, you're wrong.
So in fact,
excuse me, sir, I haven't finished my answer. Look,
I'm sorry, Dr. DeMeyer, were you not finished with the prior answer?
I was not answering. Right, I'm answering your question.
Okay, all right.
It's not statistic. It's kind of like if you hear hoofbeats outside. When you look out the window, you expect to see horses, not zebras, running down the street. And the thing is, the whole life is controlled by statistics. You assume what you're going to get on the elevator, it's not going to drop straight down. That's probability. And the thing is you use it, but you don't make your decision 100% on statistics. And I just used that the intraoral gunshot wounds are almost 100%. Actually, to quote your own medical examiner, he said he had only seen one case in 3,000 autopsies. Well, if you move, that's actually less than 1%, isn't it? See, 10% is 300, 1% is 30, 0.1% is 3. So he's saying he sees it in less than 0.1%. And that's your own expert.
That an intraoral gunshot wound is a homicide.
Right.
But it does happen, correct?
Of course it
And it's
does.
happened in your experience, correct?
I've seen in 37 years, 3 homicides intraoral.
And of course, you're aware of Dr. Hawley, having seen other intraoral homicides as well, correct?
Dr. who?
Dr. Dean Hawley in Indiana?
I'm not aware of him.
All right. It wouldn't surprise you if he had done a paper on intraoral gunshot wounds and indicated that in his experience he has seen homicides that were intraoral. That wouldn't surprise you at all, would it?
If you go long enough, you'll see everything.
So statistics do not get us any closer to the facts of this particular case, correct?
Yes, they do. The thing is you don't make your decisions straight on statistics, but you have to consider probabilities. If you didn't consider statistics, then DNA, you'd have to discard use of DNA, and I don't think your office is going to discard DNA.
Well,
DNA is all probability. That's all it is.
Well, Doctor, we're not talking about DNA. First of all, we're talking about a statistic of intraoral gunshot wounds. And with DNA, you know that we're also talking about in the hundreds of quintillions, correct?
It depends upon, and it's not as simple as that. Suppose your probability is 1 in 100 billion with DNA. All that means is, if you have 100 billion people, in a sense, maybe one will have it. But suppose the first person you count and meet is the first in the 100 billion. So Everybody uses probability. Probability is the basis for existence of our life. And what I'm saying is you don't say this is a suicide because it's because it's an intraoral and it's 99%. I told you it's a whole mosaic. It's the intraoral, it's the blood, it's the tissue, it's the gunshot residue, all of that. You can argue with any one of them. I'm saying you put them all together, and this is my opinion.
Okay. You have, over the last day and a half, indicated a level of expertise in several different categories of forensics or science.
My expertise is in forensic pathology.
All right. And you've indicated a level of expertise, I think, under questioning by Mr. Plord in firearms, in blood spatter analysis, GSR, psychology, psychiatry, physiology, toxicology, physics, fluid dynamics, hydrodynamics, statistics, ballistics.
I don't even know what hydrodynamics is.
Well, I'm going to get to that point in a second,
Okay,
Dr. DeMaio.
but-
I can assure you, but let me finish my question. Ballistics, criminalistics, and histology. You have indicated, or at least touched upon, every one of those subjects. Is that right?
Yes, because most of those fall into either straight pathology or you have to have a working knowledge of them for forensic pathology.
So are you an expert in each of these
again,
Excuse me, I don't think he's finished his answer.
if you fire a gun, I mean, if you don't know how a gun works, you say, gee, this person's got a hole in the front and a hole in the back and there's a track going through it. I wonder what caused it. You have to know a little about it. I'm not a firearms examiner. I do not represent myself as a firearms examiner. And all I'm interested in blood spatter is the blood coming out from the body. I don't do angles. I don't do secondary fling-offs and things like that. I'm just sticking to forensic pathology, which has to incorporate these
All
things.
right, so to kind of finish up on that point, Dr. DeMaio, and I think you began to make it, but the reality is, as you sit here, you're an expert in forensic pathology. You are a medical examiner by training, correct?
That is right, sir.
You are not an expert in firearms.
No,
You're not
I am
an
not
expert
a firearms
firearms
examiner. That's correct.
All right. You are not an expert in blood spatter analysis.
I only address blood spatter ejected from the body. So anything beyond that, I do not do. That is correct,
So you
sir.
don't do the analysis at the crime scene.
That is correct, sir. And I have not ventured any opinions on that.
And of course, you don't, the same would hold true with regard to GSR analysis, correct?
Right, all I can do is I interpret gunshot residue. My laboratory did it, but I didn't do the actual testing.
All right, so any information you would have about gunshot residue analysis, any information that you would have about blood spatter analysis would be information that you've read from other sources, correct?
No, some is observation and some is interpretation because you give me the results and then I interpret it. And there's a chapter on gunshot residue in my book.
And of course, you consulted with outside sources to write that chapter.
Actually, no.
You wrote that chapter yourself.
Yes, you review the medical. It's kind of like when you go to the medical literature. If you want to write about certain tumors, you have to review the medical literature and then combine the medical literature with your experience. So with blood spatter, I went to the medical literature. I got the articles by Karga, and then I incorporated them into my experience and wrote what I wrote.
All right, and of course, the Karger analysis or the blood spatter analysis they did was the German set of doctors who did that overseas, correct? That
That's
was
correct.
the paper that you're talking about.
Yes, well, there's 3 papers actually.
All right, and the same holds true with, I won't go down the entire litany, but the same holds true with the exception of medical school and some training that you may have had in psychiatry or psychology. You are not a psychiatrist or a psychologist.
That is correct.
And getting back
I'm
to
just giving you very basic psychiatry, the principles that are known to all physicians.
And-
You have to know that. It's part of
done?
the practice of medicine.
Okay. And of course, this goes back to the comment that you made to the jurors just a few minutes ago. You are certainly not a physicist. You're not a hydrodynamicist, correct?
All right, I didn't express any opinions on that.
Well, we'll get to that in a second, Doctor.
Except for the kinetic energy, which is part of wound ballistics, and wound ballistics is part of pathology.
And you have not been formally trained in fluid mechanics either, have you?
Right, I'm not even sure what fluid mechanics is.
Well, like I said, it's coming. We'll talk about it. And I think you even said under direct examination with Mr. Plord that you are not a criminologist and you don't hold yourself out to be a criminologist.
I think you mean criminalist, not.
I'm sorry, that's exactly what I mean. I wrote it down wrong. Criminalist. You're not a criminalist and you don't hold yourself out to be one.
That's correct.
So you would defer to others that are expert in that particular field, correct?
As long as they didn't wander into the forensic pathology field.
And of course, that would hold true for you too. You certainly wouldn't want to wander into their field either, would you, Doctor?
I don't wander there.
All right. With regard to the statistics that you cited yesterday and today,
Yes.
you indicated that firearms are the most common method of suicide, and drugs are second. And you indicated, I think your quote was, women prefer firearms. Isn't that right?
On a statistical basis, yes.
Where do you get that stuff?
Okay, hold on a second. There's a paper. Okay, it must have stuck together. Hold on. I'm going to have to start over again.
1, 2, 6, 7. All right, while the doctor's looking for his materials, you may approach.
Oh, no, here it is. Stuck. It's the article's called Suicide Among Women, a critical review. It's published in the Journal of the American Medical Women's Association in 2004. Is the one that refers to the incidence of suicide preferred women preferring to shoot themselves. Now, as to that they prefer handguns, that's in the article by Kohlmeyer, which was published in the year 2001. It's a 1704. Kohlmeyer also cites a paper by Wintermute, who reviewed 235 firearm suicides in California and found that handguns, that a greater percentage of women used handguns than men.
Handguns as opposed to long rifles.
Rifles and shotguns. And that was published in the American Journal of Public Health in 1988.
Doctor, what is the CDC? What does that stand for?
The CDC is the essentially Center of Disease Control, right?
For the United States?
Yeah.
All right, and it is a United States funded or a government funded organization.
That's correct. Yes.
Can I finish?
Yes.
Sorry. It is a government-funded organization that maintains certain statistics throughout the country for the proper control groups, depending on what it is. It can be anything from how many cases of appendicitis to how many cases of ocular disease, correct?
Yes, sir.
Kind of runs the gamut. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. And the foundation for any reliable statistic, as a matter of fact, you've heard the phrase kind of colloquially, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics, right?
That's correct.
So statistics can be manipulated by clever folks, clever mathematicians, et cetera, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and they can sound any particular way you want them to. So one of the hallmarks of a good statistician is to maintain a good control group for the statistic, correct?
Well, you don't. Okay. Whoa. Control group? No.
Do you know what I mean by control group?
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I don't know if you know what you mean by control group. Control group means if you do an experiment, you have to have an equal number. Okay, suppose you want to give a drug to a test out of a drug. So you give it to 100 people, and to another 100 people, you give water and tell them that's the drug. That's what a control group is. In statistics, you don't do a control group. You do a statistical analysis,
and you
do
maintain
standard deviations,
and you maintain a certain group of individuals that you are seeking to do the statistic on. For instance, you said women prefer guns, correct, to commit suicide.
Oh, what I said is that the statistics published in 2004 state that the most common method of suicide in women is guns.
Actually, what you said was, quote, women prefer guns.
No, then I said women prefer handguns.
Okay.
That's what I said. And they do handguns, and that's in the study by Kohlmeyer, and it's also the study that came out of California in 1988.
So your testimony is that and how you applied it to this particular case is that in your mind, the statistic that's important to you is that women prefer handguns, and therefore that played into, at least in part, your determination of the manner of death in this case, along with several other things.
Absolutely, it played no role at all.
All right.
If you remember, I quoted other things. I never did. I just wanted to inform the jury because there's a myth about that women don't shoot themselves, women don't use handguns, and women don't shoot themselves in the head. That's called an education. What I was letting them know that's not true. But that really played no role in my conclusion.
All right. Were you just about to say that was an educated guess?
No, it's an educational point.
I see. All right. Of course, you wouldn't guess about anything in your testimony.
No, sir.
All right.
If you notice, every time I give you a statement,
The person at issue in your mind was Lana Clarkson when you were analyzing this case, correct?
Yeah, oh, well, that's the main person involved. Yeah.
All right. Of course, there was another person involved, wasn't there?
Yes.
All right. With regard to Lana Clarkson, she was a 40-year-old female, correct, at the time of her death?
Yes, sir.
This happened in 2003, correct?
Yes, sir.
To your knowledge, she was Caucasian, non-Hispanic, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. So a proper statistic, if you were to look at statistics, might include 35 to 44-year-old women who are Caucasian, non-Hispanics back in 2003, correct? Might be an applicable statistic.
You might be, except for one slight little problem.
Okay, what's that, doctor?
The problem is what you call a Caucasian. In my community, which is San Antonio, the population is maybe 60% Hispanic, Mexican American. Well, they're all classified as Caucasian. So 35-year-old white females in my community also include people of Mexican American or South American origin.
Okay.
So that doesn't.
Okay, maybe you didn't hear me correctly.
No, I heard you're saying trying to restrict to your population.
Actually, Dr. DeMaio, if you'll allow me, please.
Yes, sir.
Maybe you didn't hear me correctly. I indicated 35 to 44-year-old female, white, comma, non-Hispanic, comma, females.
How do you differentiate white females, non-Hispanic, from white females, Hispanic, if you use my statistics and lots of other people's statistics who don't differentiate?
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's use the CDC statistics.
The problem with the CDC, which I don't know if you've ever talked to the people personally, and I have, is that 40% of the death certificates are filled in incorrectly in the United States.
All right. That notwithstanding, the fact that you obviously know more about this than the CDC does, would you agree or disagree that the accurate statistic for 2003 in the United States for suicides, women aged 35 to 44, considered white and non-Hispanic, using the CDC's definition, the number one cause of death was in fact poisoning, which is otherwise referred to as overdosing or something else. And the second would be firearms.
Yes, sir.
You see that statistic?
Yes.
Okay.
No, we should mark it.
I'm sorry, that's my fault.
Your next exhibit.
Equals 155?
Yes, it is 155.
I'll place it to you 155 on the bottom right-hand corner. All right. So according to the CDC at least, no, it's fine. According to the CDC at least, given those particular controls and that group of individuals, women don't prefer handguns. Those women prefer poisoning or overdose.
No, that you haven't proved that with your statistics.
I'm not asking if I proved anything.
No,
I'm asking if you're aware of the CDC's findings.
Your statistics don't say that, sir. What your statistics say, if you want to go with those, is that in that narrow age group that you've picked, then women prefer to take poison rather than shoot themselves.
And of course, Lana Clarkson was in that age group.
Again,
correct?
you're interrupting.
First of all, let me make that determination, which I have to agree with.
Right.
Let him finish his answer.
Yes, Your Honor.
Next question after that. Go ahead and finish your answer.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. But what I said is they prefer handguns. Now, that is not addressed in the number that you showed, but never mind.
So you do agree that, in fact, in that age group with white women back in 2003, the number one, the leading cause of suicide was in fact, or the leading method of suicide was in fact overdosing.
If you narrow it to that 5 age group, and and I assume that you're giving me the straight statistics, which I will assume, then it does.
Okay,
And
thank you. And of course, I want to stick on this subject for just a quick second before I move into your report. Just so I understand this, statistics will not answer a particular question in a particular case. I realize that they have their use, Doctor.
Right.
I'm not arguing that they don't have their use in life. I mean, some people are statisticians by trade. What I'm asking you is, do statistics by their nature answer any particular questions in any particular case?
what they can do is give you a probability and narrow the field, so that you can, and it's a factor that you have to take into consideration. And so if you have a probability of 99% or something like that, you have to consider it. You can't just assume that it's 50-50. You have to consider that. Now, you don't call it just on that unless you have other factors that you incorporate, or otherwise what you have is a complete pandemonium.
All right, so for instance, let's use one quick example before I move off this point. If I were to ask you, as you sit here right now, what color car do I drive? You'd probably have no idea, would you?
No.
All right. What if, and that's the question before you, all right, what color car do I drive, Alan Jackson? And if I give you a statistic that most cars, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, but let's say most cars on California highways and freeways are white. Now, doctor, what color car do I drive?
So I wouldn't give you, because I would prefer something with 99% probability, not most. So if you said 99% of the cars were white, then I would say the probability is 99% of the time that your car, 99% that your car is white.
And of course, that would be a guess, wouldn't it?
No, sir.
That would be a guess based on statistics.
That's not a guess. There's a difference. A guess would be, well, most cars. But when you get 99%, you're right. It's probability. If I told you that if you bought this lottery ticket, you had a 99% probability of winning $10 million, I know you would say, give me the ticket, because you would say 99%. Yeah, it's worth a chance.
Worth a chance, but certainly not definitive and certainly not scientific. In other words, if you wanted to know what kind of car I drove or what color car I drove, doctor, you'd need to look in my garage, wouldn't you?
Excuse me.
No,
Okay.
let him finish his question, and then you can answer.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Did you understand my question?
Yes,
Dr.
sir.
Morrow?
And you said it's not scientific. Yes, it is scientific. The way the 99% is calculated is based on science. It doesn't necessarily give you the 100% answer, which is why I did not say this was a suicide or self-inflicted wound just based on that. Just based on that, yeah, the probability is 99%. But you have to take into the other factors and see if there's anything else. Now, if you said it was 99% probability that, well, never mind. It's we're getting into statistics,
And they're not worth much, are they?
no, yes, they are worth.
All right, you know what? I'll move on.
Believe me. Well, then you're going to have to dismiss all your rape cases in this county, because they're all based on probability, which is what DNA is. DNA is probability. You'd have to throw out every single case of rape prosecution in this community if you said, let's throw away probability.
You done?
Yes.
Okay. Now that we've addressed statistics, let's move on to your report.
Yes.
You did, in fact, file a report in this case, correct?
Yes, sir.
How many notes did you, or how many pages of notes did you take in preparation for either your drafting your report or your testimony in this case?
I don't take notes. What I do is I sit down, I read everything, and I go and I highlight everything, and then I sit down and I write the report.
When did you write your report in this case?
The report's dated February the 10th, 2007, so sometime just before that.
And you wrote a second report in this case dated March 23rd, 2007.
That's correct. That had to do with the tissue.
So did you sit down to write the report on February 10th?
Oh, no, I would have written it before,
Why is it dated February 10th?
because that's the day that I would have signed it and sent it out.
When did you start writing this report, Dr.
I would
DeMine?
have absolutely no idea.
Was it close in time to the time that you were first hired to consult in this case?
Oh, no, this would have been written immediately prior to February 10th.
So what did you have available to you when you sat down to write this report?
There's a list of the things that I have available.
Okay. Do you want to tell me what those are?
Yes, sir.
You're right.
Oh, there is. Sir, I understand completely. And
Yes.
If you want me to approach, if you think we need to, I know exactly where the concern is.
You know what? Let's do it this way.
Okay. Thank you.
Let me ask, did you consider the coroner's file?
Yes, sir.
Did you consider photographs of the scene and the body?
Yes, sir.
Did you actually attend the autopsy in this case?
No, sir, I did not.
Didn't you indicate that obviously attending the autopsy would have been the best course for gleaning as much information as possible about the findings of the medical examiner, in this case, Dr. Pena?
It may or may not. I'm not disagreeing with any of his physical findings at autopsy, just as his opinion as to the cause, as to the manner of death.
How about the physical findings on the tongue?
I'm not disagreeing with him.
Okay, so you agree that there was a bruise on the left side of the tongue, correct?
Oh, yeah, I agree with all the findings.
And you're aware that he did not find any kind of bruising on the right side of the tongue?
Yeah, but that's in the picture, though.
I'm not asking you what's in the picture, what's not. I'm asking you if you
I
agree or
know that,
disagree
but
with
the
it.
picture is part of the autopsy report that I could see.
Okay, so, and you're aware that he did not find any malady on the right side of the tongue?
He did not describe it, yes, sir.
Well, I think malady is, it's perhaps not the best word, but I think it's understood.
Didn't find any defect on the right side of the tongue?
He didn't describe it, that's true,
Right.
yes, sir.
And you read his entire autopsy file?
Yes, sir.
All right, but you have no qualms with the rest of the autopsy that he did?
No.
All right. As a matter of fact, you found his autopsy to be professional,
Yes.
to be within the standards of the medical practice in which he does practice, correct?
Yes.
All right. You had certain laboratory reports generated by the Sheriff's Crime Lab, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you read the notes associated with Dr. Pena's autopsy, his actual protocol?
I read the complete coroner's file on the
Did
case.
you also read the complete LASO file, the Sheriff's Office file?
No, I just read the laboratory reports.
All right. So you didn't read for instance, Dr. Harold's notes, Mr. Renteria's notes, Ms. Pinto's notes?
If they were part of the laboratory report, I would have read them, yes, sir.
All right. And you read certain of Ms. Clarkson's medical records, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And I think you've already indicated on direct examination you covered certain emails from Ms. Clarkson, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And there were certain toxicological reports as well that you read
Yes, sir.
and became familiar with.
Yes.
All right. Are those the items that you basically had at your fingertips when you drafted your report?
Except for including items 7
I understand.
and 8, right.
But the things that I've listed are things that you had at your fingertips when you were actually drafting this report.
Yes, sir.
And this report was drafted sometime in 2007.
Yes, sir.
Just before February 10th.
Yes, sir.
When did you actually examine the clothing, the actual physical evidence in this particular case?
When I made the trip here back in late last year.
Was that May of 2006? Does that sound right?
It may be.
May or June, something like that?
Something like that.
All right. And you didn't take any notes about your findings or conclusions at that time?
No, I did
So you
not.
just based anything that you brought into your report in February of 2007, you brought in from memory?
By observation, yes, sir.
I'm sorry?
I didn't hear your answer.
By observation.
And it's your memory of those observations that made their way into the final report?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right, let's turn to your report for just a second. There's a few things that I want to go over. One of the first things that you indicate in your report is consistent with how you've testified over the last day and a half, and I think we've covered the effect of this. You start off by saying most intraoral gunshot wounds are self-inflicted. Now, you agree that in and of itself is simply a statistic, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, that is not a medical opinion specifically. That is an opinion of or that is a citing of a statistic, not a medical opinion.
Well,
correct?
it's a medical opinion, but it's not a medical diagnosis. That's what you mean.
You're aware of other statistics in the same realm, correct? I mean, if we're going to talk about statistics a little bit, I want to ask you about a couple of other statistics. Are you aware that women who are killed by guns to the head, in other words, gunshot wounds to the head, are 8 times more likely to be the victim of a homicide than a suicide?
I wouldn't be surprised.
All right. Another statistic. Most people who shoot themselves do so in private.
I agree.
As a matter of fact, that you agree because those are your words. That came right out of your book.
Right. I agree.
Another statistic. Most people who commit suicide do so in their own home, not only in private, but in their own home.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. The vast majority, Dr. DeMaio, of people who do kill themselves with a gun, they do not shoot themselves in the mouth, correct? They pick some other area on their body rather than the mouth.
Right. Only 14% of the people shoot themselves in the mouth.
Which leaves us, I'm not that good at math, but leaves us with about 86% of the time, people pick a place other than intraorally to kill themselves with a gun if they do so, correct?
That's correct, sir.
All right. And of course, women are less likely to shoot themselves in the head than they are to shoot themselves in the chest or abdomen. You agree with that statistic as well?
Right. There's a 9% difference compared to men.
All right. You agree with the concept that you can't simply, any unbiased, objective expert cannot simply rely on the statistics that are tailored to one side or the other. I mean, a good, neutral, objective, independent forensic expert would of course let the trier of fact know all of the statistics that are relevant to a particular issue. For instance, suicides and homicides.
Yes, sir.
All right. Yet none of these statistics that I've just mentioned, you've mentioned, with the exception of the 14% in your direct examination, correct?
I think I mentioned that. The notes that I gave you prior to this have this all broken down.
I'm asking about your testimony before this jury.
I answered the questions well. Okay, what didn't I say? I didn't say it was mostly in the house. And it's mostly, yeah, but I wasn't asked that question.
Okay. And if you weren't asked it, you weren't going to volunteer.
Volunteer what? I mean,
When you were asked what you took.
Yeah, I know that, but if I had started sitting here volunteering things, I don't think the court would appreciate it. I'm supposed to answer questions here, sir.
All right.
So, okay.
And in fact, when you were asked what did you base your opinion on, you didn't volunteer these statistics that I've just read to you, but you did in fact volunteer the statistic that most intraoral gunshot wounds that you've seen in your experience.
Yeah, because that's the most significant thing, because it's the percentage is so high, it's over 99%.
All right.
Even according to your own medical examiner.
You've read Dr. Lee, Dr. DeForest, and Ganslin's book.
No, sir.
You're not familiar with Dr. Lee, DeForest, and Ganslin's book called Forensic Science and Introduction to Criminalistics?
I haven't read the book.
All right. Would you have any quarrel if in their book they indicated that any reconstruction hypothesis?
The way you're phrasing the question, I would sustain it on hearsay grounds. You may rephrase it.
Sure. Let me read you a quote and ask you if you agree or disagree with this hypothesis.
When you say you're reading a quote, the objection is sustained. There's other ways to do it.
Doctor, are you well, let me ask you this way. Would you agree or disagree with the hypothesis that any reconstructionist's hypothesis must take into account all the facts and observations, every fact and every observation into account, and certain facts cannot be ignored because they simply fail to fit the hypothesis? You would agree with that, correct?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
I mean, the thing is like when I was talking about history, that's why you want to get all the history, even if some of it turns out false.
All right.
You just want to get everything.
And
yes.
I'm sorry, are you done?
Yes.
Any interpretation by any reconstructionist in an effort to reconstruct certain things or certain events, especially regarding a crime, should be a true scientific endeavor and not be mere guesswork. Do you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
All right. Did you consider the fact that Lana Clarkson was in fact not home when she was killed?
Oh, yes.
Did you consider the fact that Lana Clarkson had met Mr. Spector basically that evening and was pretty much a stranger to him?
Oh, yes.
Did you consider the fact that she was in a stranger's house when she was killed?
Yes.
Did you consider the fact that Lana Clarkson would have no way of knowing where Mr. Spector would have had guns in the house?
Sustained.
Did you consider the fact that the gun was actually in a bureau drawer?
Objection. Well, I'll withdraw that.
That was probably yes.
Okay. Did you consider the fact that there was an associated holster in a bureau drawer?
Yes, sir.
Did you consider the fact that the gun was loaded with bullets that were consistent with other bullets throughout Mr. Spector's home?
Yes, sir.
Did you consider the fact that Lana Clarkson was actually seated by the back door when she was killed?
She was seated next to a door, that's right, which is the main exit and entrance, yes.
And that would be the back door where the motor court is, correct?
Yeah, I think it's used more as a front door than the front door. I don't think is very accessible. I think it's actually okay. Yes.
She was seated by a door.
Yeah.
I mean, just within feet of a door.
Yes.
And she was seated there with her purse on her right shoulder, correct? When she was
Yes.
found.
Well, it had slipped out onto her lower arm. Yes, sir.
On her lower arm?
It slipped down to her upper arm, behind her upper arm, and ran down straight along and parallel to her forearm.
All right. In fact, it was basically just off of her right shoulder, correct?
Yeah, and then it ran down the arm.
Right. The strap.
The strap, right.
All right. So basically, I mean, not to split hairs, but her purse was basically on her right shoulder.
Right.
All right. And you considered that and come to your conclusions
yeah.
and opinions. Yet the first thing in your report, notwithstanding the fact that you indicate to this jury that you considered all of those factors, the first thing in your report was intraoral gunshot wounds are normally suicide.
Because that's the most important thing, and you have to organize it. You don't start a report with saying there was dirt on the back porch, and then about the 35th item you say, and the elephant in the living room. I mean, the thing is you organize reports usually in the order of importance as you go down. And so that, in this case, the most significant thing is that's an intraoral wound.
So
It is the most significant.
your testimony is, Dr. DeMaio, the most important thing in your mind, in your opinion, as an expert forensic pathologist, the most important thing in your mind in this whole case is the statistic that most intraoral gunshot wounds are suicide rather than the actual facts of the case. Is that your testimony?
No, sir. The facts of the case, it's an intraoral gunshot wound. And the most important thing is that forensic pathologists know that intraoral gunshot wounds are about 99% plus suicides. That's an important thing. You can't just say it's statistic and we cannot consider it. It has to be considered, and that's one of the major points that people don't commit homicide by sticking guns in people's mouth. As you pointed out, they shoot people in other areas.
But of course, it can happen.
Yes, sir.
And you've seen
Anything
it
can happen, but basically it's improbable. So you have to consider that as one of the things. And then I combined it with anything else, and I looked for anything that was contradictory. So you look at the positive and you look at the negative, and that's what I did.
All right. And not only can it happen, Dr. DeMaio, it has happened.
It's happened 3 times in 9,000 autopsies. Yes, sir.
And this could be the 4th.
Well, since I didn't do the autopsy, it wouldn't be the fourth. I would count for the Los Angeles.
All right.
Correct.
Let's talk about GSR for just a second.
Yes, sir.
You indicated that you have filed published chapters in your book
Yes, sir.
concerning GSR. I think you've talked at length with Mr. Plord about GSR.
Yes, sir.
I assume that you've read scientific literature about GSR.
Yes, sir.
Did you consider the fact that he came out of the house and said, "I think I just killed somebody"? Did you consider that fact?
Scientific studies,
Yes, sir.
industry journals.
Not industry journals, scientific articles.
All right, scientific articles, textbooks, other publications regarding.
Basically, scientific articles in the journals.
All right, and that literature has been on the subject of GSR and GSR analysis and the use and misuse of GSR, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the interpretation of GSR.
Yes, sir.
And of course, you've also read scientific articles and textbooks about firearms and ammunition and propellants and things of that nature, correct?
Yes, sir.
There are criminalists and experts who have published articles and books almost exclusively about this subject, correct?
They publish material, yes, sir.
All right, and the FBI is one source of information that is published on this particular topic, correct?
Yes, sir.
Other experts include a fellow that you were here in court with not long ago, Stuart James, correct?
I don't think he's published on GSR.
Okay. How about Werner Spitz?
Werner Spitz probably has a section in his book on GSR, but I don't think he's got I don't know how much experience he has. Can't tell you. You're going to have to ask him.
How about Paul Kish?
You're going to have to ask him.
I'm not asking you what his experience is, Doctor. I'm asking you.
Well, I'm trying to tell you, I don't know what.
Doctor, you need to wait until I finish my question.
Yes, sir.
Diana can only take one of us down at a time, please.
Yes.
Okay? What I'm asking you, Dr. DeMaio, is whether or not you're aware of Paul Kish ever publishing on the subject matter of GSR.
I don't recall.
And you know who Paul Kish is, of course.
I'm sorry. Hold on.
Do you know
And-
Mr. Kishan?
No. I know he's one of the consultants in this case. That's
Am I interrupting? Do you need to?
No, but I was if you were going to ask me some questions, I was going to try to get my references
Okay.
and why.
If you need references, we'll give you the time to take whatever.
Yes, sir.
All right. You agree that there is a certain scientific consensus about GSR and the use of GSR, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And that certain scientific consensus has been published widely on the issue of GSR.
Yes, sir.
Experts in the industry tend to agree about the science of GSR, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And in fact, you're aware, well, in your report, did you say, quote, as to GSR, Ms. Clarkson had abundant GSR on her hands.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Spector only had one unique and one consistent particle on his hands.
Yes, sir.
All right. And you indicated the presence of one or two GSR particles on the hands does not mean that an individual fired a gun.
Yes, sir.
There is scientific evidence, for instance, or e.g., GSR on Ms. Clarkson's hands, consistent with the fact that she was holding the gun at the time of the discharge, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you stand by that statement?
Yes, sir.
You are well aware, Dr. DeMaio, that according to the scientific literature, that statement is patently false, correct?
No, sir.
There is absolutely no way, according to the scientific literature, Dr. DeMaio, that you can tell who fired a gun simply by the existence or non-existence of GSR particles on one's hands. Isn't that true?
Excuse me, sir.
Is that or is that not true?
In virtually all cases, you cannot determine whether a person was the firer of a gun. And that's why if you look at my report, you left one word, you're forgetting the word that's in front that says consistent with. Gunshot residue is used in most instances by medical examiners to determine whether it's consistent with. And that's what I said in the whole thing. Any one of these things, I'm telling you, you can take away and explain. It's the whole picture. There are rare instances in which, you want me to give you an example? of a case
I want you to
where,
try to answer my question,
Yes.
whether or not you, in fact, know that the scientific literature and the scientific community are in agreement that the existence or non-existence of GSR on a person's hands will not tell you anything about whether they fired a gun.
I disagree with that, because if we look at the scientific literature, such as the summary of the FBI Laboratories Gunshot Residue Symposium in May of 2005, there's something very interesting about this literature. Go look what the attendees are and tell me how many MDs were there. None of these people signs a death certificate. Go to the gunshot residue literature. These are technicians. They don't sign the death certificates.
So you know something they don't know,
Yes.
correct?
May I finish my
I
answer?
wish you would.
Here's the whole thing. When you analyze, in these people who do that, they determine what gunshot residue is. And in and of it by itself, gunshot residue just means that a gun has been discharged. Now, what the forensic pathologist wants is to determine the distribution of the gunshot residue, or whether it's present, to see if it's consistent with the person firing a gun. Thus, I had a case in which a man was supposed to have killed himself by shooting himself in the head with a gun. There was no gunshot residue on his hands. When you took the gun and fired it 23 times under the same circumstances, there was never less than 63 gunshot residue particles on his hands. So if you fire it 23 times and you get 63 plus particles, and he has no gunshot residue on his hands, I would think some people would conclude he did not fire the gun. And what I'm saying about it is the way the deposition and distribution of gunshot residue is used by medical examiners is not to say this person fired the gun, but this is consistent with other materials that he fired the gun or he did not fire the gun. And that's why in my report I use the word consistent.
And what you actually say is there is scientific evidence, e.g., GSR on Ms. Clarkson's hands, consistent with the fact that she was holding the gun at the time of discharge. Is that what you said?
That's what I said.
All right, and that was the quote that I read you the first time.
And that's what I said. And
Dr.
that's
DeMaio,
correct.
why did you not go on to say it's also consistent with her not having fired the weapon? Why did you not include that in your report?
Because I assume that the person reading the report, I'm not going to get that. Because anybody who is a scientist would know what you have just spoken about. The thing is, if you go to the literature says that you cannot determine whether a person positively fired a gun by just the GSR. So GSR is one of the pieces of the puzzles that you use. Now, like in the case I told you, this man had no GSR, but when you fired the gun 23 times, every time there was 60 or more particles, and he had not one particle on his hand. I think you would be committing idiocy if you said, well, I can't determine whether he fired a gun this way. 63 particles plus 23 times.
I have really no idea what that has to do with my question.
It has
the point that you're trying to make. My question to you is, Dr. DeMaio, you didn't include the other alternative, which is the GSR on her hands are consistent or is consistent with her not having fired a weapon, but is also consistent with her just being in the environment of a weapon which was fired, correct?
Because this is a scientific report, and you assume that the person reading the report has some basic knowledge of what's going on.
So you wrote this report for other scientists, not for discovery to the prosecution in this case, in anticipation of your testimony. Is that what you're saying?
No, sir. I assume that the prosecution employed scientists who could interpret it for the district attorney what the report meant.
And of course, you testified yesterday and today exactly the way that your report sounds. The GSR is consistent with Ms. Clarkson having fired the gun. You testified.
Means I'm consistent with what I said in the first place, and I'm consistent what I published, and that's what I said. It's consistent with.
And you didn't say to this lay jury, who is not a jury of your peer scientists, but a lay jury, you didn't say, and it's also consistent with Ms. Clarkson not firing the gun.
No.
Is there any reason you left out of your testimony, Dr. DeMaio?
Because that's how you testify, consistent with. I mean, it's just, never mind.
This is part of the objective scientific evidence that you told us about, correct?
Well, you had scientific witnesses testifying here when I was present who were not objective, who said things that were absolutely nonsense and did not need scientific.
Okay, now that we have an objection.
Fine about what others have done. I'm asking you what you did.
And I testified that it's consistent with. And the jury, the jury is stupid or something.
A half-truth in case Dr. DeMaio, which is gunshot residue will not tell you who fired a weapon, correct?
Right, sir, and I never. Right, sir, and I told the jury, any one of the things I'm telling you, you can explain. It's the whole pattern when you put it all together with. There are very few things that are consistent, that are 100% in this life. Death and taxes are probably the only two. And the thing is it's consistent with, and that's what it says.
I think she had her hands trying to get the gun away. That's what I think. I think that's why she had gunshot residue on her hands.
And it's also the GSR that appears on Mr. Spector's hands are also consistent with him. Yes or no?
No, sir.
All right, thank you. As the objective, what drives you in this particular case, the key word being objective.
Yes, sir.
You would find it inappropriate if anyone taint his or her testimony to favor one side or the other. That would be inappropriate. That particular expert would lose credibility, for
Yes, sir.
because that other than an unbiased, untarnished expert, correct?
Yes. Overruled.
How much have you gotten paid by Mr. Spector so far?
I'd say I charge $400 an hour, which is the same I charge the city of Los Angeles. And the ones of the visits so far, I've charged $26,000, $26,400.
Is that including today?
No, sir. The longer you talk, the more you're
it's
running up
costing
the
Mr.
bill.
Spector, right?
So if if you
Never
want to
thought about
decrease,
it that
if you
way.
want to decrease the thing,
The longer I talk, the more it's costing Mr.
and the state,
There is,
you're getting,
$26,000, not including your testimony yesterday, correct?
that's correct.
How much are you getting paid for yesterday and today?
I charge $400 an hour based on an 8-hour day, not to exceed 8 hours.
$400. Thank you, Sudi. Wow. Yeah, I just emptied your wallet a little bit there. Sorry, Doc.
You only make my wife mad. That's it. Then you're in big trouble.
The fact of the matter is, you were hired by the defendant back in February of '06, correct? Is that about when?
You're right. I was contacted then, yes.
All right. And ultimately, you were hired by him to consult on this case, to look at the evidence, and to write a report.
Yes, sir.
And that's the report that I've been talking to you about today.
Yes, sir.
And you're still working for Mr. Spector. You're still in his employment.
Well, I'm working for his attorneys.
All right. Working for his attorneys, the advocates on this case.
I think they're called attorneys, sir.
And they're advocating a particular position, correct?
Yes, sir.
As a matter of fact, let's talk about that for just a second, Dr. DeMaio. I don't mean to digress, but you were here yesterday, and you may have been here on one other occasion listening to Dr. Lynn Harold testify, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And is there a reason that you were in the courtroom?
Well, yesterday, because they thought I was going to get on yesterday,
Okay. What about before that?
to listen to what she was testifying to.
And in fact, at the breaks, I was in here, I saw Lynn Bodden about Lynn Harold's testimony during her cross-examination, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you had huddled with her during my direct examination?
Well, I didn't really huddle with her as to the testimony. I just talked to her. And actually, I don't think I discussed the testimony.
You didn't give her questions to ask Dr. Harold on cross-examination?
No.
You weren't here to help feed her any questions whatsoever?
No, sir.
So the fact that you were being paid a pretty hefty sum, $400 an hour is nothing to sneeze at. The fact that you I'll withdraw. The fact that you were being paid by Mr. Spector to be here and listen to Lynn Harold's testimony had absolutely nothing to do with, according to you, helping Linda Kinney Bodden in her cross-examination of the state's witnesses, correct?
That's correct, sir.
Because that, of course, would make you more like an advocate rather than an objective scientific expert, correct?
No, sir, it wouldn't.
If you were assisting Bodden in cross-examining a witness?
I would, okay. You're not an advocate, you're a consultant. So if I did give her information, questions, I would tell you. It's just that I didn't do it. And it's perfectly proper for me to tell her, what she said is wrong. Why don't you ask her this question or that question? But I didn't do that.
Okay.
All right, at this point, we're going to take our recess for 15 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind the initial will resume in 15 minutes.
The rules early on that lawyer will only question that witness and that lawyer will only make the objections towards that witness.
Okay.
So whether or not Mr. Ford wants to object to an argument and grounds or not is his decision because it's his witness.
Okay.
Okay, but there are two things that have been going on in not Mr. Dixon's examination, but in Mr. Jackson's. One, the court made it very clear. Counsel is not to yell at the witness. That just happened. Secondly, Mr. Jackson editorializes many of his questions. He's a very skilled advocate. He's an experienced advocate. And he's a smart guy. It's not proper, and it shouldn't go on in this court. Because what it's doing is entertaining these jurors. We're not here to entertain them. This man's life is on the line. And I wanted to bring it to the court's attention because I'm sitting here listening, and I'm sure the court saw the expressions on my face. And I'm asking the court to put a stop to it. He shouldn't be yelling at the Ogden Halter and says that he knows how to directly examine. The defense team doesn't do that.
Okay, to respond, one, I don't think Mr. Jackson yelled. I disagree. He did not yell. As to whether or not you wish to object, I make an assumption, and certainly there are things that could have been objected to. The problem is, I don't interfere with defense strategy. Sometimes a witness is allowed to run on for a specific reason. It may fit into what you're planning. I don't intersperse my own objections. And so without an objection, I don't rule. I agree there have been objectionable times or things that could have been objected to. I'm not going to interfere with your case. If you want to make an objection, make an objection.
It's not the substance of the questions, it's the editorialization of the way he introduces questions and sometimes the way he finishes off with using it as a bridge into the next question. It's not proper.
If you think there's something inappropriate, object, and I'll rule on it.
Very well.
Okay? Thank you. All right, we're in recess.
Thanks, Judge.
Okay. Well, yeah, I didn't hear him yell. I can't believe that. I don't like that lawyer. He just rubs me the wrong way. I do not like that man. Okay, now we're going to Pearl Karen Reed. Oh my God. And I will tell you the tea when we get over there. It should portal you. Yes, the judge is awesome. I love Judge Fiddler. Okay, let's go. Let's go. Let's go. If you're not going to Karen Reed with us, I will see you in the morning. If you're going with us, let's go. We got stuff to talk about. Bye.